Okay. In this chapter, I think the focus will be on painting some of the veins across this model. So let's go ahead and just create a new layer just to not, ruin the work that we have on the other layers. And of course, at the same time, I'm just going to go into solo mode. And, this is basically what we have right now. All right, so first of all, just going to go ahead and just look for areas that have actual modeled veins on them. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick a color, and I'm going to start off with a blue because that's probably the most visible vein color on a character that you might have. Okay, that's good, that's good. You know what, I'm going to choose a different alpha. I think alpha 01 is probably the better bet. And I'm just going to touch a part of the model to just kind of zoom in. And at the same time, okay, RGB is 85, and the intensity, well, that doesn't really matter. Dots, skin shaded, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you know what? I think I could just start it and, start with the painting. So I'm just going to start painting this color in here like that. And you know what? You don't have to be necessarily you don't have to worry about painting it perfectly right now, because quite frankly, I can just go ahead and lower the opacity. I can always erase it, I could do whatever I want, but what I'm looking for is just to be able to paint in some veins and then just lower the opacity on that to get something like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. But at the same time, I do kind of want to fade in some of this work. At the same time, I guess what I could do is I could go ahead and just start off with a larger radius. And if I start off with a larger radius, I could just paint this area in very subtly, like that. I could just go ahead and just paint it like that, just to kind of hint at some of the areas where the veins might go. And I think that's what I'm going to do overall, is I'm just going to go ahead and just paint in some of the underlying veins, just kind of going to hint at some areas that might have veinage. Like that. Now when it comes to the hand here, I'm just going to go ahead and just use a larger radius. I'm just going to add some color here. I don't have to be too specific, because I will be overlaying a reddish color on the palm anyways. You might have noticed that I have some reds in here. Well, I will be in fact overlaying some reds in here as well. And the majority of the blue is really just going to be in this area here, because this area here has the thinnest amount of skin and no real big bulks of muscle. I mean, like here you have a lot of muscle that is used to drive the thumb, and but here, of course, you don't really have much. So you have all you have really is just a thin amount of skin here. So I could just go ahead and just kind of go over that section, just broadly, I guess. Now I'm going to try to paint in some of the finer veins. I'm just going to fade it in. Like that. Okay. Perfect. And of course, I could always shrink my radius, and I could just start painting some of the finer veins in here. And again, just remember this one thing, that right now I will be painting this, I will be in fact fading a lot of this out. At the same time, there's this vein here that I've kind of missed up until now. And of course, I could make it a little bit more desaturated and just overall darker when I paint over this area. And I know that it looks kind of bad right now, but once I fade out this section, it should look okay. Maybe a little vein that goes across the finger here. Oh, there's another one here. So let's fill that in. Alrighty. Okay, so we have all this veinage in some of these areas. Have one here that I notice. And of course, I really should be fading it in into the lighter skin areas. Okay, so that's what we have for now. And of course, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just lower the opacity of those colors. So at least I have something, but it is fairly faint. Might even want to bump it up and then just go ahead and just wash it over later. I guess that's another thing I could do is I could always just bump up the color, and then once I bake everything in, I could just go ahead and just go over this whole area and just wash it out. I think that's probably the better option for me to take right now. Probably I'm going to need something along the neck here. Like that. And this character really does have some thinner skin here, so I might as well just draw something right across the crotch area. Like that. And you probably will see a little bit less here and more across here. But again, this part really won't be seen all that much. I'm just kind of doing it just for the sake of completion as far as texturing goes. And we're probably going to need something along the ear here. And of course, one thing that I probably should note is that, once you start painting a lot of these veins in, the one thing you could do is you could always go back and model some of the actual veins in as well. Okay, that's looking okay. I probably might want to add one or two along this side here. And then of course, once we get done that, paint them down on the leg as well. And at this point in time, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and just create a new layer. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I really want to have some sort of ability to kind of, fade in certain sections in and out to how I see fit. And I guess what I could have done is I could have even layered the veins themselves. I could have made sure that the lighter touch to the veins when I had the broader brush when I was drawing in the vein areas, I probably could have let that on one layer and then left the finer drawing of the stronger veins on a separate layer altogether, so that I could then fade in and out the stronger, finer detail of the veins, but still retained a lot of the broader strokes for, that I drew earlier. That would have been probably another approach I could have taken. I probably should have taken. Well, you just don't overdo it in terms of all this detail here. And just draw them where you feel that, they would probably go best. And, always refer to your reference books. I think that's probably the best move that you could do. Make sure you're drawing things in the proper spots. Okay, I'm going to fade that out, of course. I just want to leave some faint coloring behind, but I really don't want to make it too strong. And you know what? Let's see how it looks with a flat color. So I'm just going to go ahead and just go into a flat color. And it really is really subtle. I might want to bump it up a notch. But at the same time, I think this vein here just kind of ruins it. So you know what? I'm just going to undo that. Get rid of that vein and just leave this at 1. At least for now. Let's see how the rest of it looks. Okay. It's looking alright. Maybe bump up the blue color here. All right. So as far as the blue veins go, I think that's as far as I'm going to take that. I'm just going to go ahead and just paint in some red veins as well, just to kind of hint them in there. I won't go as strong with these ones though, because I mean usually it's the blue ones that show up a lot more clearly. And of course I really should probably just make one more layer just to be able to paint and fade these ones in. Like that. And I guess what I could probably just do something, you know, with this area here as far as the model goes, but again, considering all of this will be hidden underneath the clothes, I don't think there's really any good reason to bother too much with it. And of course, again, yeah, I have a lot more detail on this side. Just added on here as well. And that's probably too much. Like that. Just add in a little bit of warmth. And of course, if you overdo it, you could always just undo that move by pressing Control Z. And again, all I'm doing here is I'm just painting in some redness, some veins. Of course, when you're painting veins, you really want a sort of a slightly finer brush to do this with. And of course, I am not using symmetry right now, so I might as well just go over to the other arm and do the same. And now that we have that done, I guess the one last area that's kind of left over is the overall head. So I'm just going to paint something in here like that. All right, let's see how it looks when it's when I fade it out. Again, I just want to keep all these things very subtle. I don't want to overdo it. At the same time, I do kind of want to see it as well, so let's fade this out. Slight touch. And then let's put the thing back into the shaded material, because I really do want to see how everything kind of looks together. And alright, so we have some very subtle veinage going on here. Very faint. Just how I like it. And yeah, I think that's going to do its job. Alright, so as far as the veins go, we're kind of done. The only area I could probably use a little bit more is probably around the eye here. And you know what? I'm not just going to paint this in, I'm going to go ahead and just color some of this stuff in here. I'm going to sample a color. I'm going to then go ahead and just make it slightly darker. And I might as well just work on the eyes as it is right now. And the reason why I want to do this right now is because I really don't want to waste too many videos, too much of your time with this, because I mean, this is really a simple process. I mean, there's really not that much that's going to go into the actual eyelid. I'm just going to keep it very simple. I don't have to finish, you know, any of the inside part just because it's going to be covered up by the eye. All I really have to worry about right now is just this part here. And of course, when I want to get finer with my details, I could just go ahead and just zoom in and detail it in like that. Now, obviously, one thing that I should probably mention is that before I go ahead and do any of my final detailing on this model, before I do any of the extraction process, I will be in fact adding an HD layer which will give me a little bit more detail to be able to assign to this model. I will be able to go in a little higher in texture detail. Of course, I'm not going to really go over how I go ahead and edit the texture. I mean, I might go over maybe one area, but I'm just going to leave it very simple. I'm going to present exactly what it is that you can do with HD geometry, and it really is, I mean, the thing that you could do with HD geometry is really just adding more detail that you would otherwise be able to add, but it's pretty much exactly like subdividing the model, except it goes a little bit further. So I will explain how it works, but that's going to be a little bit later in the process. And of course it is important because it will give us a lot cleaner detail when we go ahead and extract our maps. So it is very important that we do that, especially for characters. If you go ahead and work on something for film, you might want to use it, just because if there are any close-ups of your characters or any objects that you're painting, then it probably will be important for you guys to have you know, just a little bit more detail in your model so that it just, you know, ends up looking better. I'm going to pick up now the lighter color here. I'm going to make it even lighter than that. Make my cursor a little smaller. I'm just going to paint in some highlights. And really, I probably shouldn't be painting any highlights, really, because, I mean, all this stuff is really supposed to be either detail inside the model, and I could always go back and add some of that detail into the model. At the same time, however, it should also be handled by light and all the other stuff, but I do kind of want to add some texture variation to the actual skin, especially around this area. I don't want it to make it too flat. Okay, so let's see how that looks for a little bit further away. And at the same time, not only further away, but I actually want to see how it looks with the eyes on there. And that's not too bad. I still have to go ahead and just sharpen this up, so I'm just going to sample from here. Smaller cursor, of course. I'm just going to sharpen up this line here, like this. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because I really do want a cleaner detail for the eye. Because previously I really did kind of make some rough lines around this area, and I really do want to clean that up. I want to make all this stuff fairly, I mean, as polished as I can, really. And there's always more that you could do. And of course, I could always just go ahead and increase my brush size and just go over this slightly, just to kind of fade in that inner eyelid part to the overall skin color. Just make some sort of fade in there. Alright, that's not too bad. I might actually want to later go in and you know, darken in some of that detail. And I might even want to do that now. Like this. Not too much, however, but just enough to add in some shading to this area. A little bit of contrast and just change it up, because right now it does kind of look flat from farther away. Whoops. Darn it. All right, once again, let's look at it from further away. And that is looking better. I probably might have maybe overdone it with the red color in there. Once again, I could just go ahead and just pick the lighter color, paint over the darker part that I just kind of drew on a second ago to just kind of bring back some of the pink that I had. So, and yeah, basically I have something like that. I'll look at it from further away. Does it look good? I'm liking it. Again, maybe the eyelid is a little too thick overall. I mean, normally, you know, people in real life, I mean, the eyelid would be a lot thinner than that, but you know, it is a fantasy setting. So, yeah. Okay. As far as the eyeball goes, I am going to be using another part of the program to do that. I'm going to be using the ZApp link. But the next part that I'm going to be working on specifically is the inside of the mouth. So I'm going to be coloring it in. I'm going to be, you know, coloring the teeth and the tongue and all that stuff. And then, of course, once I'm done that, I will go ahead and just finish up the eyes. Actually, I'm going to start introducing ZApp link. I'm going to be using that for the eye. I think as far as the the poly painting, I think we're pretty much done. I mean, there really isn't a lot to it. All I really wanted to do is I just wanted to showcase a bunch of different techniques of, you know, layering skin, doing things like painting fingernails and, you know, doing all that stuff. Obviously introducing you to the layers a lot more than I had before. And one thing that I should also mention, I'm pretty sure I have mentioned it before, is that you could always rename these layers to whatever it is that you want, especially if you have been, for example, or I guess what I'm saying is if you want to work a lot more with layers and just keep everything on a layer and never bake them, then that's always very, very possible. Oh yeah, and I guess the other thing I could probably do is just work in a little bit of more pigmentation across here. But you know what? I'm not going to do this in this video. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is because I've talked about and I've shown all this, you know, for long enough. And I think I really should move on to other areas because, I mean, everything that I'm going to be doing across here is the exact same I've done before. There's really nothing new. I mean, I would just add a new layer, paint in some spots, fade it in, fade it out, and play around with that. Now, there is actually one thing that I might want to do a little bit later on in the process, and that is to paint a tattoo on this model. And I might use ZApp link for that. I haven't really decided yet, but we'll see. So next part, I'm going to be working on insides of the mouth.